Without further ado, let us welcome our first speaker, Jason, who will be sharing his part. Yeah, Jason, please.
Just give me a moment. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name is Jason. Okay, and today with me we have Yao Ho. Okay, so both of us are mathematics teachers in National Junior College. So as what Seok has mentioned, today we'll be sharing with you how we have been incorporating spreadsheets in some of our mathematics lessons for our junior high 3 and 4 cohorts, which are equivalent to grades 9 and 10 respectively. So for my part of the presentation, I will be sharing how spreadsheets were used to conduct a lesson activity on performing partial fractions decomposition in a junior high 3 math lesson. Thereafter, Yao Ho will be sharing how he and his fellow junior high 4 math teachers use spreadsheets to carry out lesson activities for the topic of linear log, which is a study of how nonlinear equations can be manipulated into a linear form for ease of computation and analysis. Okay, so before I start my sharing proper, let me first provide some context. Okay, so in the teaching and learning of junior high 3 math, okay, there's a topic called polynomials and partial fractions. And within this topic, there is a subtopic where students learn how to break down an algebraic fraction into a sum of simple fractions. Okay, so this process is known as what we call partial fractions decomposition. So typically in the teaching of this subtopic, students will first be taught the general procedure to decompose a few different types of algebraic fractions into their partial fractions form. Okay, and then as we move most kind of math lessons, okay, they are tasked to practice applying this technique for a series of questions. Okay, so then this made me think a bit, so the procedure is the same for different kind of algebraic fractions. So how about we can get the students to try using some kind of technological tool to automate the process? So for example, maybe they can use Google Sheets. Yeah. Okay, so this led me to come up with this lesson activity to carry out for my students. Okay, so the learning goals for this activity are as follows. Okay, so firstly, when we use technology to help automate the process, okay, it builds the students' computational thinking competencies, okay, as they have to plan how to algorithmize the process of partial fractions decomposition. Okay, but in order for them to do this, they first need to be familiar with the process of how to decompose algebraic fractions into partial fractions. So such an activity will also help to deepen their conceptual understanding of the process. Okay, and lastly, as I conducted this activity in a group setting, okay, the students will also need to tap on their collaboration and communication skills. Okay, now let me briefly explain how the lesson activity was carried out. Okay, so firstly, this activity was conducted after the topic had already been taught in class. Okay, so as a prelude to the actual activity itself, I first conducted a quick recap by calling upon a few students to verbalize the key steps in the technique, okay, since they had already learned the procedure. Okay, thereafter, I then presented them with the Google Sheet template for decomposing one kind of algebraic fractions, and I tasked them to fill in the template with the necessary spreadsheet formulas so that the template will produce the correct values, okay, in the partial fraction form, no matter what the algebraic fraction may be. Okay, and then once they were done, I called upon a few groups to present their template to the rest of the class. Okay, after they were done with this activity, I then posed them a different task, okay, where they now had to create a template from scratch, okay, for a different kind of algebraic fractions. And similarly to the previous task, I then called upon a few groups to present their solutions to the rest of the class. And lastly, we concluded the lesson with a few reflection questions, which I posed to them through the means of an online form. Okay, so here are some considerations we need to bear in mind when we conduct this activity. Okay, firstly, the students in this cohort had already learned how to use spreadsheet formulas from similar activities conducted earlier in the year. So for teachers intending to conduct a similar activity, okay, you may first have to conduct an introductory lesson on how to use spreadsheet formulas. Okay, and of course, one very current concern that a lot of teachers will have now is what if students use AI to complete the task? Okay, so later we will see that AI is not likely to be very effective in tackling this task. Okay, so on the screen now, let me just briefly explain how this template works. Okay, so what you see here is the template that was presented to the students. Okay, so in these two rows, you see an equation relating the algebraic fraction on the left hand side, okay, to its decomposed form on the right hand side. Okay, so basically whatever values the user decides to key into the yellow colored cells, okay, the blue colored cells must produce the correct values accordingly. Okay, so of course this is done through spreadsheet or Excel formulas. Okay, and from row 7 onwards, this is the procedure that students typically go through if they were to solve the problem using paper and pen. Okay, so essentially the idea here is now they need to verbalize what they have learned, okay, through keying in the necessary formulas into the blue colored cells. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, the use of AI is not very effective in solving the problem. I tried myself to key in the problem into a chatbot, okay, and here you see that it is not very successful. Okay, of course, some students who may be more competent, they may be able to use more refined prompts and get more correct results. But then again, regardless, they will still need to understand the output clearly in order to verbalize their ideas. Okay, so I think the AI concern will not be a very big one in this case. Okay, so I will now share some video recordings of the students in action. Okay, before I proceed, kindly note not to take any screenshots or screen recordings, okay, as the students may be seen in the videos. Okay, kindly allow me some time to toggle to the video player.
Wait, don't, oh yeah, I don't understand. What do you do?
Because if like, for example, it's 2x plus 3, right? Then you need negative 3 divided by 2.
You take note of coefficient.
A equals to what? Low key, I don't understand.
Okay, so here we see that the group members were trying to explain their choice of formulas to each other. So evidently, when they are stuck or they cannot understand how to proceed, they become frustrated. Yeah.
Wait.
Okay, so I will now show another video of the students in action.
Right, I'll just turn my camera off.
Okay, so as you can see here, what the students are doing is they are trying to check the accuracy of their formulas by solving the problem by hand using the values they have chosen. So because as with any programming or coding activity, we will naturally expect some errors to be present in our first draft of the codes. Okay, so this is a necessary step in producing the solution. Okay. Okay, so as I mentioned, after the groups were done with their activity, I then called upon a few groups to present their solution to the rest of the class. Okay, so now we'll watch a video on a student presenting his group's completed template, okay, for the first kind of algebraic fractions. the video may be soft in certain parts. Okay, I will later clarify what the student has mentioned. Okay.
So like the sub X equals to 1, right? It's actually you're trying to make the other part 0, so you can find the A. Yeah.
Why is that? Why is the cell C17 also for user entry? Yeah.
It's because if it's like you preset a value inside, then there might be some cases where the sub X goes to whatever makes like one of the values inside is then you cannot find that.
Okay, so in summary, what the student representative was trying to do here is that he was trying to explain that the value of X to be substituted, okay, in the cells, okay, should be 1, which makes the factors of the denominator 0. Okay, then he also tries to explain in response to my prompting question, why is it for the last step, the user gets to decide what value of X to substitute in. Okay. So as I mentioned, there was a follow-up activity where the students had to create a template from scratch for another type of algebraic fraction. Okay, so now we will watch another video. Okay, one last video on a student representative presenting his group solution for that follow-up activity.
So firstly, at the bottom at row 5, we need to add the 2x and the 2, and then this will cause this C and D thing over here, and the B and C. Then afterwards, we have to change the multiplying both sides, the second bracket, and then afterwards, we have to work out the whole equation again. And then we tried to sub -2, and we got error. So yeah. And we will get A, and then afterwards we sub A back to thing, and we sub X equals 0, and we will get C. And then afterwards we'll sub C. We'll sub C, X, and A to find B. And then we sub all of it to find D. And then yeah, we solve the equation.
So how is this template different from the previous one? What are the changes that you have to make?
Well, we have to add extra number because it is supposed to be quadratic equation, and we have to add B, C, C, and D because also a quadratic equation, and we need to change the second bracket on in row 7 because the quadratic equation.
Okay, so basically what the student was trying to do here is to explain the key difference between this task and the earlier task. Okay, but so just to explain simply, the choice of word that he used was incorrect. So instead of saying something like non-factorizable quadratic expression, he used another term called quadratic equation, which doesn't correctly bring out the point. Okay, so this is an example of sometimes where we may have to prompt the students further using scaffolding or clarification questions in order to elicit the correct terms from them. So for example, we could ask them, oh, when you say quadratic equation, what do you mean by that? Yeah, okay. Okay, so I will now go back to my slides. Just give me a moment. Okay, so some key takeaways I gained from conducting this activity is that firstly, of course, this is meant to be a collaborative activity, but what I did notice is that the students like to immediately split the different parts of the template amongst one another, and then they work individually. Yeah. Okay, and as you have seen from the videos, okay, they may be able to fill in the template with the correct formulas, okay, but when it comes time to explain their reasoning, okay, they may struggle in using the correct language of terms. Okay, so this is where the teacher's presence and prompts are important in order to elicit the clear responses from them. Okay, and lastly, I conducted this activity in a 1.5 hour lesson, which was in truth very tight. Okay, so in retrospect, perhaps it would have been better if I split the lesson into 2 1-hour lessons. Okay, so the time factor is a very important consideration for this ability. Okay, so with that, I conclude my part of the presentation. Okay, thank you for your attention. Okay, I will now hand over the time to Yao Ho, okay, to present how his team had used Excel in the topic of linear law. Okay, so Yao Ho, please.